Hello Internet, I am Dimitri from College Corp, and today's video we will be talking about North Korea and a whole lot more. Now, North Korea has recently been in the news for more threats and stuff, and what we have to do right now is we have to understand how the modern state of Korea came to be. It dates all the way back 60 years to the aftermath of World War II. It was split along the 38th parallel, with the USSR communists supporting the North, and the Democratic United States supporting the South. Now, up until, the mid-1940s, there really was no formal government for North Korea. So Kim Il-sung, who was the leader of the Provisional People's Committee, created it. And he was like Lenin. He nationalized industries and overall improved the economy greatly. However, a communist government doesn't like talking with other people about anything, especially in Korea. So in Moscow and in Seoul there were talks about unification, but nothing really happened, nothing really became of it. And then the Cold War heated up, you had the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, a couple years later you had Vietnam and all that nice stuff. So North Korea invades South Korea, and we have the Korean War. The city of Busan becomes the major military harbor for the United Nations forces as they try to beat back the North Korean advance. But North Korea actually would have won the war if not for the United Nations stepping in. The United Nations, newly formed, decided to flex its muscle, and it was led by the United States. Shocking, united. And so they did. They did actually beat back North Korea, almost all the way to the Chinese border along the Yalu River. And then China was like, we're communists and they're communists, and if they lose, we lose communism, so that's not a good thing. So China stepped in, and China had huge amounts of manpower, and they used this massive amounts of manpower in order to push the United Nations forces back to that 38th parallel approximately, and that is the armistice line. So an armistice was called, and as temporary ceasefire. They're still technically at war with each other. There really was no peace treaty. But that's what we now call the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. There's no military presence there, but there's a whole bunch of fences and mines and all that nice stuff in case anybody wants to attempt to walk through it. They'd get blown up into a million billion little pieces. Yay! Now, after the war, North Korea was in the shitter. They were absolutely and totally destroyed economically and financially. But North Korea had a significantly better recovery from the war than South Korea did. And the DMZ currently is the most heavily defended border on the entire planet. There are more than 1 million troops along this 200-mile border in between the two countries. The border technically doesn't exist, it's just a demilitarized zone, but it functions as a de facto border. Yeah. And the North Koreans say that the US presence there is an imperialist expansion force, which doesn't seem to make any sense because the people are still free, but whatever, North Korean education is quality education. Gotta love it. So anyway, after the Korean War, North Korea actually came out much more financially stable than South Korea did, and the only reason why is because it had two major powers supporting it. It had the People's Republic of China, which was communist, and it had the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Ain't that a mouthful? So the GDP of North Korea compared to South Korea was much better, and it greatly improved, but the problem was the fact that China then started rapidly industrializing in the 1970s. So China couldn't give North Korea any kind of aid when the economy stagnated in 1987, and Mao Zedong died back in 1976. So the leader Kim Il-sung started like cutting ties with China, and so it just kind of broke down. And then, everything started and a domino effect happened, and it wasn't very good for many people. Of course, logic, as you can see. And so that didn't help, and then they lost all the extra aid that they were getting from the Soviet Union, because then the Soviet Union essentially just disappeared. It just vanished. The entire Soviet Union collapsed. The Iron Curtain, that's a funny Titanic picture. The Iron Curtain was lifted, peoples were liberated, and that was that. Or at least as far as the West was concerned. Now, the North did not have the means to feed all of its people, and eventually, widespread flooding and much devastation happened because they had about 5 or 6 years of just constant rain, and so all the crops were flooded. Any form of infrastructure that was there was destroyed. It was very, very bad. And in 1996, things actually picked up for them because they accepted UN aid, which included US economic aid. And so the US President Bill Clinton and Kim Jong-il were actually on very good terms. But of course, as you can see, Kim Il-sung died in 1994, and so his son took over. Kim Jong-il took over, and so he gave a fresh start to a dying nation. And he had this policy called Songun, which is completely and totally mispronounced, which I believe means military first. So what he did is he boosted up the North Korean military, which I don't quite fully understand why, but he also put restrictions on travel as well, so that didn't help. And so they bought a lot of these kind of tanks, T-54s. These are former Soviet tanks. And so, I mean, for the most part, North Korean and American relations were on better terms than what they'd been before the Korean War and before the Soviet Union was still around. Till that guy walked into office. That guy right there. Because in 2001, George W. Bush denounced the North Korean government and called it a rogue state. And because of this, North Korea felt extremely threatened. And I wouldn't blame them. One of the world's superpowers is threatening the stability of your country. So they started developing nuclear weapons. And they got a perfect example of what the US could do when they went into Iraq. And we found all those weapons of mass destruction. But North Korean efforts paid off. On October 9th, 2006, North Korea claimed it had successfully conducted a nuclear weapons test. Well, we know that was confirmed later in 2012. They claimed it. So, in decreasing order of nuclear arsenals, Russia, the US, the UK, France, Israel, Germany, Turkey, China, India, Pakistan, Italy, Belgium, and North Korea. North Korea has the fewest amount of nuclear weapons, approximately 3 or 4. They are very, very expensive, and I'm kind of surprised that Jong-il would even bother spending research on it because he has a lot of people to feed. Oops. Whatever, bro. So, with every great leader, they are only human after all. And Kim Jong-il died in 2011 from a heart attack, the exact same way his father died. And Kim Jong-un, right there next to the hearse, replaced him as leader, or ascended to the throne. And so he likes to challenge the United States every now and then, and that's nice because I feel like he has to prove himself to his people. So it would make sense that he needs to actually try at what he does. So he's pulled out of the armistice agreement, in theory at least, from what I've read on the internet. And he's tested nuclear weapons. We saw great perfect examples of that the other year. So he does have it. The only problem is that by funding a military that much, you kind of lose out on your own people. the ones that were starving. So what they've done is they've clear-cut land to make use for military. And so it's actually screwed up weather patterns throughout all of North Korea. So they get torrential downpours between July and September, and they get massive flooding. You just can't grow crops. And I'm surprised they didn't do terrace farming in North Korea, because it's very, very mountainous. Exactly what the Chinese did and probably still do to grow rice and other kinds of crops. But when you clear cut land, you definitely affect weather patterns in your region, especially that much land. Most of the land is very, very, very mountainous in North Korea. And North Korea probably has a lot of ores like coal and probably some iron. But as far as farmland goes, they're not really in a good spot for it. And I'm kind of surprised they don't spend more money on that. But hey, nukes, right? Gotta have those nukes. Lovely. So, in summary, the current leader of North Korea is Kim Jong-un. His people are always starving, and he thinks the best result is for nuclear weapons. Of course, that's the answer. Now, North Korea and South Korea may unite, but only North Korea knows the answer to that question. And North Korea isn't telling. And always, thanks for watching.